Okay, tonight we're going to talk about pitching, so there's a number of things that we would like to cover. Let's go ahead and start off with some highlights. This is pretty simple stuff, warm-up pitches. We're going to give 8 for the starter or any relief pitcher who comes in to relieve, and then obviously for in-between innings, it's 5 pitches for a starting pitcher returning. So that's pretty elementary stuff. Pitching positions, we're going to talk a lot about that tonight, but that's going to be predominantly determined by the pitcher's feet. There are some hand requirements as well, and we'll talk about that as well. Wind-up position, there is this hybrid that's out there. People call it a hybrid. I actually don't like to call it that, but I guess I'll use that nomenclature for tonight. And then we have the set positions. So those are our positions for pitching. We'll also address the gorilla stance as to whether if it's legal or not, and if so, how does it remain legal as part of the pitcher's means for pitching. Balks, we'll cover a fair amount of balks. What is a balk and what are the penalties for the balk? And we still get questions regarding the 31 move. That's the third to first move by the pitcher. And that is still legal in high school baseball, not so for college or pros, but in federation rules, the 31 move is legal unless the pitcher somehow balks on a move to third base, which he can do. So we still have to be aware of that balking to third. Medical compression sleeves, there were a number of changes that have come out over the years. The most recent changes were that those sleeves need to be a solid color and preferably not the camouflage, which would be illegal. Oh, we lost that. And just as a reminder, the compression sleeve is not considered part of the uniform. It's not part of the undershirt. It's a separate piece of clothing. So again, solid in color, black or dark, not camouflage. Hidden ball trick, we really don't see much of that, but I put that out here. You might see it from time to time in the playoffs because teams are looking for an edge. But again, that's when the pitcher positions himself approximately within 5 feet of the pitcher's plate without the ball. So we'll look for that, and we'll talk more a little about that in the playoff briefing that we're going to give you guys in May. And then replacing a pitcher to a defensive position that is allowable. They can actually do that once per inning, where they take the pitcher from the pitching position, move them over to a defensive position, let's say second base. And then they want to return him back to the mound. They can do that, but they can only do that once per inning. Okay, so pitching requirements, when do they begin? They begin when the pitching regulations begin when he intentionally makes contact with the pitcher's plate. So when the pitcher is no longer in contact with the pitcher's plate and he disengages, he has to disengage with the pivot foot. And if he disengages, so here we have 2 examples where in a set position, you would take the pivot foot, which is highlighted in black, and he disengages. The disengagement has to be to the back side of the pitcher's plate. And for the windup, it's the same. He has to take his pivot foot and he has to disengage to the back side of the pitcher's plate. And then when they re-engage, they just re-engage the pitcher's plate by stepping forward. And here's our rule on this, 615. The pivot foot has to be clearly off the pitcher's plate in order for him to legally disengage. And as a side note, when he does that, he no longer becomes the pitcher. His status is now that of an infielder. And that's important distinction to remember, particularly when we get a ground ball to the infield and it passes the pitcher at the pitcher's plate, whether if he's engaged or disengaged. So we talked about that in one of the batting reviews. So just remember that he's an infielder when he has disengaged from the pitching plate. All right, let's talk about the pitching requirements, and we're going to start with the lower body, and so that means the feet. And again, the feet have to be in contact with the pitcher's plate. So here we have some examples of a legal wind-up position where we have both the pivot foot and the non-pivot foot in contact with the pitcher's plate. Or in the right example, the pivot foot is in contact and the non-pivot foot is off. That is a legal wind-up position. Everyone talks about this hybrid. I truly believe that this is a legal set position. I prefer to refer it to a set position, but I know there are people out there call this the hybrid. Okay, we can call it that as well, but it is really a legal set position. Or excuse me, a legal wind-up position. For the set, the main difference here is the pivot foot has to be in contact with and parallel to the pitcher's plate. So that's the main differentiator between the wind-up and the set position. Upper body requirements for the wind-up, hands together in front. Example B, hands are down at the side. You could have either hand in front or at the side, or you can have the glove hand typically in front with the pitching hand behind. Those are all legal hand positions and shoulder positions for the windup. For the set, you can clearly have the glove in front of you or in front of the pitcher, and the ball can be held in the pitcher's hand at the pitcher's side. The ball can be held in the pitcher's hand or in the glove with the ball in front of the pitcher when doing the set position. So just getting back to the feet requirements for one more time. So here we have the wind-up position. We show 3 examples where we are in a legal wind-up. And please note that it's for the wind-up, you have to be very conscientious about the non-pivot foot. That's the blue footprint in our screen, making sure that that foot, the non-pivot foot, is extending through the front edge of the pitcher's plate. So in all 3 examples here, we see that the non-pivot foot is breaking the front edge of the plane of the pitcher's plate. Here are some illegal examples where we have the non-pivot foot in example D, which is now in front of that plane, so it's not breaking the front edge of the plane. So that would be an illegal wind-up position for example D. In example E, it's illegal because the pivot foot is not in contact with the pitcher's plate. So even though both feet in this example are breaking the front edge, it's illegal because the pitching pivot foot is not in contact with the pitcher's plate. For the wind-up position, as we shown earlier, this is legal because both the pivot foot and the non-pivot foot are in front or breaking that front edge of the pitcher's rubber. Now here are 2 examples of the hybrid position where in example G, it's an illegal wind-up because the non-pivot foot is no longer breaking that front edge of the pitcher's plate. There's now a gap, if you will, between the front edge and the non-pivot foot. In D, if for whatever reason a coach may come out and argue, well, no, my pitcher's in the set position. Well, he can't be in the set position because the requirement to be in the set position is for the pivot foot to be parallel to the pitcher's plate. So these are 2 examples of an illegal pitching position, whether if they argue the windup or if they argue the set. And as we already discussed for the set position, all of these examples, I through L, are legal because the pitcher's pivot foot is parallel and in contact with the pitcher's plate. The only option for it to be illegal is if the pivot foot is not in contact with the pitcher's plate. And this is really the only example, or it could be extremely forward of that, but you may not see that. You might see this more than that. So here's a quick summary of all of the positions: the windup, the hybrid, if you want to call it the hybrid, and the set position, and what is legal and what is illegal for feet requirements. And again, just as a reminder, what is the pivot foot? Well, the pivot foot is that foot that makes contact with the pitcher's plate and the hand associated with the delivery. So if he's a right-handed pitcher, the pivot foot will be his right foot because his right hand is the pitching hand, and for the left, it will be the left. So, not to beat a dead horse, but the windup is the one pitching position that gives us the most challenges when we're out on the field. So again, here's our legal positions for the windup, whether it's the standard windup or the hybrid. In our second example, I've shown a little bit of an offset, but that is still legal in both positions. Now that non-pivot foot is creeping forward of the front edge of the pitcher's plate. So this is now where you're going to have to start using some judgment as to whether or not you feel there's too much space between the front edge and the non-pivot foot. So if you see examples like this where it's close, they may not be touching, but it is still close, you might just want to leave that alone or wait until a coach may come out and approach you and say, hey, I think that's an illegal pitching position, and then you can take care of it then. But in the meantime, I would probably leave that alone until, again, a coach comes out and complains. But now, in our last example, as that foot, whether if it's in the standard or the hybrid, now you start to see a meaningful amount of distance between that non-pivot foot and the pitcher's plate. Okay, that's when you can go ahead and take care of that. So here's an example of a wind-up position where we have the non-pivot foot, and you can clearly see, I drew a yellow line as to what I thought was the front edge of the pitcher's plate and the non-pivot foot. There's a clear amount of distance between the two, and this is something that we should call when we see this on the mound. For the set position, there's actually one move that is now, I think it's becoming a little bit more prevalent, where they're in the set position and they seem to be using a wind-up delivery motion while in the set. And what I mean is using the blue foot as our non-pivot foot. What they'll do is some pitchers will take a step backward in the direction in which they're facing and then go into their delivery. Well, that's really not a legal delivery from the set position. So I know this is a little bit of a grainy picture, but we do have video that will show this. In this example, you can see the non-pivot foot back in our, just like in our diagram, from the pitcher's pivot foot, where he takes a step backward, and then from there, he'll then begin his set delivery, and that's illegal. And there's a case play out there from last year, that talks about that, because once in the set position, there's only one move, and that is a move to deliver the pitch to the plate. Okay, here's our first set of videos. We're going to talk about the illegal windup, so we have an example on that. We'll talk about the illegal set motion, which we just discussed. And then the last two videos, we're going to talk about, well, actually, when do we observe this? When should we take note of this? So we'll talk about all of those. So let's go ahead and get to our video. Recording has stopped. Good call. Thanks. I always forget about that.
I figured.
All right.
Yeah, that pumping the ball is the one I was thinking of, Norm. I'm glad you got that.
Yeah, I mean, you see it a lot in men's league because they don't know what
Yeah.
they're doing, basically. And I've had coaches come out and say, that's got to be a buck. I said, no. I said, think about it. Once he starts to go toward the plate,
What's he gonna do?
that's not an advantage because it keeps the ball in his glove longer instead of dropping his arm to initiate the turn of the body to throw the pitch. So let him
Right.
keep it in there longer. It's going to be a crappy pitch.
Yeah, and that came up in a question on that Facebook group I'm in,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody was trying to make an issue out of it. I said, it's nothing. What's he going to do?
Right. Several major league pitchers do it too. So,
Oh yeah.
you know, if people question you about it, say, hey, watch a few games on TV. I'm sure you'll see it.
Well, surprisingly, I saw it a lot in high school last year,
Yeah,
which surprised me.
because they watch TV too. You know?
Yeah, I guess that's it.
All right, any major gaffes or faux pas that we need to correct for Sunday?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Um,
I think the point got across. Although I was looking through, there weren't that many rookies on there, but they're the ones who are most affected by tonight because you know they're like deer in headlights. Because I remember what I was like. You know, oh, I think that was a balk, but oh fuck, I can't explain it. You know, so they've just got to learn what they're looking at.
The one thing I'm trying to add, and everything is dependent upon finding examples, a no stop balk. You know, there are 14 balks, but you don't want to go through all 14 balks. You want to go through the top 2, 3, or 4,
right.
you know, that people can handle. And so I'll work on that in the future.
Yeah. I mean, one question, I don't think I had addressed this. I'm senile though, but maybe I did, was asked, what's the difference between a legal pump and an illegal pump, you know, in the wind-up position? Well, you're allowed 2 pumps. I've never heard it described as an illegal pump. I mean, it'd be illegal if it's the 3rd or 4th or 5th one.
Yeah.
But, you know, because here's kind of an example. Ross Ohlendorf, who pitched for the Nationals 5 or 6 years ago, he always in the windup had the ball in his glove. And he would start with his bare hand. I don't remember if it was at the side or behind his back, but then he would go into a pump. And so the question was asked, can you do a pump without the ball in your hand? Well, sure you can, because you're allowed to have the ball in your glove in the windup position. I mean, that's what everybody did in the 1920s, but some guys, apparently Ohlendorf, continued to do it. It just looks weird because nobody else does it, but it's legal.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I have.
Everything else was good.
Okay. I messed up on the on one of the videos. I clicked on the wrong link, but okay. Oh well.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll lose any sleep over it.
Nope.
Right.
I'm trying to think. Anything else? No, that's it for me. I'm done.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Okay.
Thank you very much. John, you have anything before we take off?
No, you guys did a great job.
Thank you.